Welcome to the Mongabay Newscast. I am your host, Mike DiGirolamo, bringing you the news and inspiration from nature's front line. Joining us this week is Mongabay Associate Digital Editor, Romi Castagnino. Romi and staff writer Liz Kimbrogh visited the tropical Andes in Ecuador in a place known as Intag Valley. The region is considered the world's most biodiverse hotspot, with more than half of its species found nowhere else on the planet. Romi spoke with me about the decades-long conservation efforts to protect this rare cloud forest, the threats it currently faces from a proposed copper mine, and what communities are doing to fight back. Romi, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks to you, Mike. I'm so happy to be here.
And what is the Intag Valley like? Can you first just describe what makes it so special? This is, as Liz Kimbrogh said, the world's most biodiverse hotspot, right? So can you just talk about that a little bit more?
I love the description that Liz included in the written stories. Tropical cloud forests are the terrestrial version of coral reefs. And it couldn't be more true. This ecosystem has the greatest concentration of species diversity on land over a small area. And this area is actually shrinking over time because of all the threats trying to take over. When I visited the Intag Valley with Liz, we both said it was paradise. I mean, the tropical Andes has more birds than actually all North America, and it has nearly 1/6 of all the plant species on Earth. One of my favorites being the mosses and orchids. So you go into the forest, you go into the primary forest, and you are like in a fairy tale. Huge trees covered in bromeliads, in moss, all the birds singing. It's actually a beautiful place, also covered with waterfalls everywhere because it has a lot of mist, so there's always water present.
And I'm just going to insert this question real quick. I heard that there's not a whole lot of mosquitoes there. Can you talk about why that is really quick?
There's actually not a lot of mosquitoes, and also I didn't see any cockroaches, which is completely different from the lowland forest. That's because we're in the Andes Mountains. So we're actually on the tropical side of the Andes Mountains. So there's lower temperature than in the lowland forests. So there's not enough space to actually have mosquitoes breeding up there.
So conservation efforts have been going on here for quite some time, like many decades, and there's one in particular that you were all taking a look at. Can you tell us what the name of that is and how long has it been going on?
Yes, so it's called the Ecuador Intag Valley Project. So this is a fundraising project to help communities conserve the cloud forest of a beautiful but threatened valley called Intag in northwestern Ecuador. So it's been going on, like you said, for a long time. So in the 1960s, to encourage development, the Ecuadorian government basically opened up the forest to land grabbers. And they actually had to clear 50% of the land to prove that it was in use. So this vision of deforestation and related to development, that lasted until the 1990s. So as a result, less than 15% of Ecuador's original cloud forests were left. Now, at that time, the government brought in international companies to prospect the forests for minerals. And they actually found a huge deposit of copper. That attracted mining companies into the valley, but they were met with resistance from local communities. So that led to conservationist Carlos Zorilla with a group of local people to found DECOIN in 1995. DECOIN is a conservation group in the valley that are helping defend the cloud forest from outsiders meaning mining companies, and also restoring degraded land. So with the government's push to mine the forest and the imminent threat it poses to biodiversity and local communities, DECOIN will, with help of outside investors, like Rainforest Concern, they started to buy land to protect nature. I think that in total, DECOIN helped communities, buy 38 reserves, some of which are protect important watersheds and also benefit thousands of people. So the fundraising project is still active, and now it's more important than ever because they're legally fighting against Codelco, which is the largest copper producer in the world.
And actually, that was my next question. Can you elucidate more on this copper mine that's being proposed and how it threatens the valley? What are some of the impacts that could come from this?
Yes, so what is happening is that Codelco has a mining concession called Yurimagua, and Yurimagua lies within the buffer zone of an important national park called Cotacachi-Cayapas National Park, and also inside community reserves with both primary and secondary forests. But now, in Ecuador, even when the land is privately owned, the government still has the rights to the minerals underground. So basically, they are able to delist protected forest for mining. So now the company that found the first company, that found the copper deposits in the Intag Valley did a preliminary environmental impact study showing that even a small scale mine could cause a large amount of deforestation, threatening endangered species, polluting rivers with toxic heavy metals, and requiring the relocation of hundreds of families. Now, that was back in the 1990s. Codelco has in mind a much larger project, so the danger is incredibly huge. In the past decade, Codelco has done many perforations into the forest floor, some of them near important water sources, and the contamination is clearly visible. We actually visited a site that had a massive landslide occur after the company drilled a perforation hole. And the thing is that sometimes people think that perforation holes are just like these thin tube-like systems that does not do any damage to the surrounding forest. But in reality, they are deep perforations that sometimes reach thermal waters, which makes its way to ground level and then pollutes the streams with arsenic and other toxic elements. We clearly saw that when we visited a beautiful waterfall within the mining concession in Junín Reserve. And this waterfall actually consists of two waterfalls that are next to each other. It's called twin waterfalls. And you can see it's insane because you can see one that actually flows fresh, clear water. And then the other one, we can see that it is brown, contaminated water, one next to each other. And guess what? The perforation hole is right on the top of the waterfall. So you can just imagine what this means for the communities downstream that rely on these watersheds for their everyday life. It's actually really sad.
So what's the status then of the funding behind Decoin? A man some people are probably familiar with, whose name is Leonardo DiCaprio, posted to his Instagram the article or the information about the article that Liz wrote to his Instagram account. Do you know if the conservation project saw a fundraising bump after this? Did anything happen as a result of that?
Yes, when Liz and I saw that Leonardo DiCaprio wrote about the story on social media, we were so happy because that would mean that the world would actually see what is happening in this part of the world and maybe be inclined to help. And Carlos, the founder of Decoin, told us that he got a hefty donation. I think it was $10,000 because of the story, which is amazing, and now, before, all the funding would go to buying land for conservation and restoration. Now everything is going into the legal cases that are hiring lawyers, transporting into Quito, the main city of Ecuador, to go for trial and everything. So I think it's really important that they have funding for the legal case. And I think it's worth mentioning that right after Leo's post, the judges actually pushed back the trial to March until they can visit the mining concession and see for themselves everything that would be lost. So there's a lot that just posting on social media can do for conservation.
So this article is the first in a line of articles that's going to be under the Conservation Potential series. Can you talk about this series and what kinds of stories are going to be coming out of it?
Yes. So the Conservation Potential series is led by Mongabay editor Alexandra Popescu, and it investigates conservation efforts in high priority biodiversity areas across the globe. So we're talking about tropical forests that are being protected by local or indigenous communities. Now, many high priority conservation areas fall within lower income tropical countries. So one of the purposes of this series is to make people aware of this project and hopefully give funding to one. So it's really exciting, and you will see stories from the Congo, Latin America, Southeast Asia, etc., everywhere.
So I'm curious to know, do you have like a favorite moment from this trip? The imagery was beautiful that you and Liz posted to Instagram, but I'm curious if there was like a favorite moment that occurred.
Thank you, Mike. There's so many from this trip actually, but I think one memorable one is when our guide Roberto Castro, he took us hiking into the primary forest of the Intag Valley. And when we got to this beautiful area with huge trees covered with moss and bromeliads and all these beautiful species of plants, he made us sit out of leaves and a fallen log and made us close our eyes, inhale deep, and just think of things that we were most thankful for in our lives. It was such a grounding moment for me and Liz, and I wanted to stay there forever. I remember those 60 seconds just gave us purpose into doing the work we're doing for Mongabay.
I mean, that's a beautiful answer. I'm curious to know if there were, and you actually already mentioned some of them earlier, what were some of your favorite wildlife species that you came across?
It's funny that you asked this because one of the things, it kind of became like a ritual for us that every night after a long day of work, we would have dinner and then go check on the light trap that Carlos made for us. So the light trap is basically a bright light pointing towards a white sheet. And this attracts all the insects in the forest into this white sheet. So we would go and be like little kids looking into the insects that we would found there. I think it was such an amazing experience because we could see more than 50 species in just one night. And Carlos would say that he could see species now that he haven't seen ever. And he has lived there for 30 years, imagine. I think one of my favorite ones is the eyed-silked moth. It has it's a big moth that has these bright yellow spots with a black inner spot, hence its name, eyed-silked moth. And also the hawk moth for its size. I mean, it's big as my palm. It was amazing. And also you could see, of course, crickets, other types of moths, colors, all the colors of the rainbow. You would think that they would be butterflies, but no, they were moths.
You actually just answered my next question. I was going to ask you because the videos you posted to Instagram of these moths they're breathtaking, but I particularly found the size of them to just be unbelievable. You said it was as big as your palm. Was this just one of the species? How big did these actually get?
This was actually two of the species. I don't remember. The first one, was the eye-sealed moth that was really big. But then I compared the size with Liz to the hawk moth, and the hawk moth won. I mean, it was almost the size of my palm, and they get it even better, even bigger. So I mean, it's amazing. And also other ones that were so bright and colorful, they were as little as like my nail, even less than my nail. It's amazing all the nightlife that there is in the forests.
Switching gears back to a question on the way this copper mine is being challenged. Communities are using something called rights of nature, which is a guarantee of sorts. Can you talk about what that is? And is this something that's unique to Ecuador?
Yes, so back in 2008, Ecuador became the first country to recognize the rights of nature. This means that natural ecosystems or elements have the right to exist, thrive, and evolve. So over the past few years, DECOIN worked with lawyers to argue that the mining development in the Intag Valley would actually violate the right of nature by threatening the habitats of two critically endangered frog species, the long-nosed harlequin toad and the Intag-resistant rocket frog. So finding these frogs has given the community kind of a stronger argument to try to legally stop mining development under the rights of nature.
Is there anything else that we haven't covered on this conversation that you really think listeners should know about Intag Valley?
I think it's insane because the Intag Valley, as locals say, is one of the longest resistance of mining that Latin America has seen. So it's such a powerful story. And we're actually releasing a video of this story in a few weeks. So listeners should be looking out for that. We're going to publish on our socials the video.
Would you be able to give our listeners a little preview of what's in the video?
Yes, so it's a documentary style video. So it's around 15 to 20 minutes. So it's a long version of the normal stories, video stories that we post on our channels. But I think that people will actually really like this video because it tells the story of so many community members that are fighting and protecting this really fragile but beautiful forest. So I think it's worth seeing.
Romi, it was really great to catch up with you. Thank you so much for being on the Mongabay Newscast.
Thank you, Mike.
Please make sure to read Liz Kimbrog's coverage of the Intag Valley with photography by Romi Castagnino, which you can find linked in the show notes. If you enjoy the Mongabay Newscast, we ask that you help spread the word by telling a friend. It's the best way to help expand our reach and keep growing. You can also support us by becoming a monthly sponsor via our Patreon page at patreon.com/Mongabay. We are a non-profit news outlet, and even just $1 per month will really help us offset the production costs and hosting fees. So if you're a fan of our audio reports from Nature's Frontline, head to patreon.com/Mongabay to learn more and support the Mongabay Newscast. That's patreon.com/Mongabay. You and your friends can join the listeners who have downloaded the Mongabay Newscast over 500,000 times by subscribing to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from, or you can download our app for Apple and Android devices. Just search either app store for the Mongabay Newscast app to gain fingertip access to new shows and all our previous episodes. And you can always read our news and inspiration from Nature's Frontline at mongabay.com, or if you prefer to keep up with us on social media, follow us at facebook.com/Mongabay, or on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Mastodon, where our handle is @Mongabay on all platforms. Thanks for listening.